In February 1787, two British ships left London with a very unusual group of passengers. Not European colonists, but over 400 black men, women, and children bound for Africa to build new lives for themselves. They weren't fleeing war. They weren't slaves being transported. They were free people, British Africans, sent to colonize a land few of them had ever seen. This is the astonishing, almost forgotten story of when black Britons colonized Africa. What happened next is a story of betrayal, resilience, survival, and also the first town in the world to grant women the right to vote. Who were these black Londoner settlers? How had they come to London? And why had they now gone to Africa? Let's find out. My name is Alex, and welcome to Depth History, where we talk about how the human condition created and creates the human condition. Soon after the ships landed in Sierra Leone on Africa's west coast, the local ruler, King Tom, appeared. The ship's captain greeted him with a 13-gun salute, presented him and his wives with gifts, and announced that he wanted to buy land for the newly arrived settlers. King Tom accepted a payment of about 60 English pounds in goods, beads, cloth, muskets, and rum, etc., made his mark on the document, though it turned out that he and the captain had very different understandings of what they'd agreed upon, and the settlers set about building their new home. Sadly, the colonists were not well prepared for life in Africa. Times were hard and they suffered badly. By September, after the rainy season, only 268 of the original 411 who had left London in February were still alive. The difficult weather, disease, deadly insects, and snakes had taken their toll on people and crops. When news of the colonists' difficulties reached London, a second ship was organized and set sail in September 1788 with relief supplies, 50 new settlers, black and white, 2 surgeons, and fresh livestock. But then came arson. When one of the local kings burnt down the colony, everyone fled. Some took refuge in native settlements, some on a nearby slave trading post, which ironically was protected by the same British Navy that was supposed to protect the colonists. At this point, the colony seemed doomed. But 2 years later, not only did it begin to flourish, not only had its relations with its neighbors markedly improved, but it became the first town in the world where women had the right to vote. How did this story begin? It began strangely enough in North America. In 1775, as the American Revolutionary War was just getting started, Lord Dunmore, the British governor of the Virginia colony, declared martial law and offered freedom to all slaves who would escape from rebel plantations and join the British forces. Later in the war, other British officials did the same. It wasn't an act of compassion. It certainly wasn't about abolition. Lord Dunmore himself owned slaves. It was a tactical move. Weaken the rebels by emptying out their plantations. More than 20,000 enslaved people took up the offer and escaped to British lines, many of them together with their families. After the British lost the war, they organized a highly disorganized evacuation of loyalists and their slaves, as well as the slaves that Lord Dunmore and the other British commanders had freed, to Canada and the British Caribbean islands. Most of those freed slaves were evacuated to Nova Scotia, a cold, rocky island off the east coast of Canada, with a climate very different from what they were accustomed to. They were promised land, tools, and safety, but what they got was broken promises, hostility from the white population, and poverty. Many of them ended up hiring themselves out to work at low wages on white-owned farms and fishing boats. By the way, if you're getting any value from this video, please click the like icon, share the video, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you'll be notified of new videos as soon as they come out. And if you'd like to support the channel, why not buy me a coffee at the link below? Now, let's get back to the video. Now, some of the freed slaves ended up in London, where the streets had already become home to a small black population known as the Black Poor, who lived in extreme poverty. In 1786, the upper-class abolitionist Granville Sharp, together with other upper-class abolitionists, formed the Committee for the Relief of the Black Poor. Sharp had been heavily involved in a string of high-profile court cases, including the Somerset case of 1772, in which the court ruled that slavery was so hateful an institution that it could not exist in England, and so the slave James Somerset could not be forcibly taken from England to be sold in Jamaica. The Zong massacre case of 1781, in which the court ruled that the insurers of the slave ship Zong did not have to compensate the ship's owners for the value of the 133 slaves that the captain had thrown overboard to conserve water. In other words, that the murdered slaves were not mere cargo, but human beings. The committee decided that the solution to the problem of the black poor was to send them back to Africa, to Sierra Leone, even though most of them had never seen Africa. The plan was that they would work hard on their own land and become self-sufficient, proving to a skeptical world that blacks were just as capable of supporting themselves with dignity as were whites. The committee raised money, outfitted 2 ships, and in February 1777, as we mentioned earlier, 411 of the black poor set sail for Sierra Leone. Why did the committee members, all of them upper-class, well-to-do whites, come up with a scheme of effectively deporting the black poor? What were the motives behind the decision? It seems that there was an uneven mix of motives. Some of them acted out of purely philanthropic and charitable motives, helping Christian poor to become capable of supporting themselves with dignity in a country where the climate was closer to what they've been accustomed to in the United States, and where they could live under the protection of the Royal Navy. The success of the Sierra Leone colony would promote the abolitionist cause. Also, blacks, even free blacks, were not safe in London because there had been cases where blacks had been kidnapped off the street or from their workplaces and immediately sold as slaves to ship captains leaving for the Caribbean or the United States. Other motives were what we would today describe as racist, getting troublesome black beggars off the streets and out of sight, and also preventing even more miscegenation. There were 60 white women married to black men on the first boats to Sierra Leone. Back in Nova Scotia, life for the black loyalists was bleak. They were denied the land and farm tools they'd been promised. They were underpaid and generally unwelcome. So a new idea formed. Could the Sierra Leone colony be saved by resettling the Nova Scotians there? The committee sent John Clarkson, the brother of the prominent abolitionist Thomas Clarkson, to Nova Scotia to pitch the idea of resettlement in Sierra Leone to the black settlers. John Clarkson went from town to town, village to village, presenting the idea of Sierra Leone to as many free blacks as he could find. His sincerity and enthusiasm quickly won their trust, and the response to the prospect of a second start to becoming self-supporting farmers and craftsmen in another country where the climate was more congenial to their experience was overwhelmingly positive. So, in January 1792, 5 years after the first ships had left London, a fleet of 15 ships left Nova Scotia for Sierra Leone with 1,192 passengers. The settlers founded a new settlement, calling it Freetown. The earlier settlers, who had taken refuge in local villages and at the nearby slave trading post, soon joined the new arrivals in Freetown. Then, in an act of monumental ingratitude, Thomas Clarkson was fired, and a high-handed administrator sent from London to replace him, someone the colonists didn't know, had no reason to trust, and who was not popular with them. Freetown was a fragile democracy, and the London-appointed governors often overrode the settlers' decisions. But the settlers, descendants of African slaves, refused to be ruled like subjects again. They demanded representation, and for a time they got it. A few months later, in 1792, when elections were held for tithing men, each of whom would represent 10 households, an extraordinary thing happened. Every household had one vote, and since women made up about a third of all heads of households, they also voted. Let that sink in. The first women to cast their votes for any kind of public office anywhere in the world were black, liberated slaves who had chosen British freedom. To give you an idea of how radical this was, Britain wouldn't let women vote until 1918. The United States, not until 1920. France, the land of the French Revolution, the land of liberty, equality, and fraternity, gave women the vote only in 1944, much later, more than 150 years later. But in Freetown, already in 1792, women could and did vote, long before suffragettes marched and chained themselves to fences. Formerly enslaved women were casting ballots in Africa. When we talk about colonization, we usually think of Europeans spreading across the entire world. But history is more nuanced. This time it was black Britons, many of them formerly enslaved, who crossed the seas, founded towns, struck land deals, survived hardships, and shaped a new society on African soil. The Sierra Leone experiment was certainly flawed, but it was also groundbreaking. Freetown became a beacon for freed slaves from the America and the Caribbean, and is today the capital of an independent Sierra Leone. If you'd like to support this channel, why not buy me a coffee at the link below? If you enjoyed this video, please click the like icon, share the video, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you'll be notified of new videos as soon as they come out. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.